Our business is primarily in the banking arena, and to the extent that that business involves placement of funds in banks all over the United States, that's basically to accomplish the $250,000 limit of funds that are FDIC insured at any particular bank. So if somebody that has $2 million or $5 million needs to place it in 8 to 10 different banks, 20 banks if it were $5 million, 20 banks in order to maintain the FDIC insurance. And it's to the extent that that's not that easy to do, highly mechanical, but you want the liquidity, that's what we do. And we currently manage $1.5 billion of other people's money, placing in banks all over the United States. We deal with banks in almost all of the states in the United States. We're currently handling sort of an average of about $3 million per investor, and can put up to $100 million in any one particular bank. So to the extent that those banks are what are known as community banks primarily, there are 7,000 community banks in the United States. Those banks are by law and by the nature of their business focused on their community. That's why they're called community banks. And they're trying to do things that are supportive of their community, building the community, making it healthy, making sure that there are jobs available, that the people's needs are being met. And we found that it was very helpful in building relationships with those community banks to work with local charities. So in doing that, 4 years ago, I founded a law firm. I'm a lawyer by background, and set up the law firm to open accounts for the benefit of local charities. So when we go into Dallas, Texas, or Las Vegas, Nevada, or Chicago, Illinois, we can basically align the accounts that we're setting up at that particular bank in that particular city with charities in that area. And by doing that, it shows the kind of relationship building that we want to do in that community, and makes it a little bit more relevant to the bank, makes them more reliable in terms of the deposits staying in that bank. So in that sense, it allows us to sort of step out of the normal day-to-day process of just focusing on bank deposits and placing money in banks to the actual relationship building process within that community. Now, to the extent that a lot of charity work these days is sort of highly focused in terms of the impact that they want, we've started to choose areas that we felt we might be able to have some kind of impact. So we've looked at healthcare, we've looked at education. There are a lot of needs in the education area, and areas that are somewhat linked to that in terms of health, etc., is urban farming. In other words, we want to help in terms of supporting activities that get kids, maybe in particular initially, but also working adults focused on doing urban gardening or urban farming, so that there's more access to good, healthy food in the local area. So to the extent that our process focuses on charities, we then start to look for charities where we can have an input, which we call an inflection point. In other words, that inflection point basically is looking at what they're trying to accomplish, let's say with respect to early childhood education. It's a very difficult problem in the United States that kids that are coming up to the third grade still don't know how to read. And so we've got programs that we're focusing on right now to, in essence, create mentoring at the pre-K level, so that there is a one-to-one support to help kids really focus on getting their reading skills correct before they get to first grade. So in that context, you don't delay the learning process. You don't wait until they're third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade to really start focusing on remedial education, remedial reading programs at that point. You try and get it immediately when they're first getting into their school years, so that they begin to learn the other things that only can come from being able to read. So you don't delay that process, and you allow them to be enthusiastic about what they're doing. So it's that kind of thing that we look for. We look for the inflection point, We look for something that we can do that can have a material impact, and then try and build on that particular process. That we're doing that in education with respect to early childhood education. We're doing that in the prison area. We work with a group called LEAP, Ladies Empowerment Action Program, which is a program for teaching women in jail how to do small businesses, so that when they get out of jail, there's a less likelihood that they're going to go back to jail because they have their own business. In other words, they're not going to rely on somebody coming up with a job for them. They're going to develop their own, it may be a hairdresser type of job for a woman. It may be, doing some kind of mechanical work for a guy, but doing it in such a way that they're managing their own business. So it's that kind of process that we're going through. In the healthcare area, we're working with assisted living facilities in the United States. There is a choice between whether or not people are moved into assisted living facilities, which is for low-income housing, or into nursing homes. It's far less expensive to the state if it's assisted living facilities. So we're working with a group that focuses on how to do that and how to do that effectively. These are the kind of things that we're now doing as a way to, in essence, re-engineer the process of social entrepreneurship. In other words, it may simply be getting somebody a job, but in this day and age, that's a social impact, making sure that there are jobs available for everybody. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to focus on building the business, using the revenue that we're generating off of the placement of funds in banks where we make a spread. And to the extent that we're generating income, we're allocating a portion of that to the charities that we support, over 170 different charities throughout the United States right now, and working on projects that expand that impact beyond just the first step. In terms of financing our business, it was slow, and it's sort of indicative of the fundraising process in South Florida, that there isn't a high level of structure to the local funding for small businesses. It's primarily dependent upon friends and family initially, which is the way that we got our program started. We've had Friends Invest probably raise close to $500,000 initially. And then got one institutional investor to put in an extra $500,000. And from there, we ended up getting involved in a group called New World Angels that is a local angel investment group. I was actually a member of that group as an investor initially, but since we were the first presenter of our company, the company that I was developing, to them, after a year of looking at other opportunities, they ended up deciding to invest in our particular business, which is the business of placing funds in banks all over the United States. So in that context, I was on both sides of it. I saw the evolution of the New World Angels in terms of trying to analyze business opportunities and the difficulties that they were having finding qualified opportunities, but also then was able to benefit from the combination of advice that they provided and structuring, as well as the initial, they put in $400,000. We ended up ultimately raising a total of $3 million in addition to our original friends and family round of $500,000. And that was able to take us to a point where we then had sufficient capital and earnings in order to be able to survive beyond that capital raising program. Right now we're more in a sort of liquidation, in other words, liquidating those investors and giving them their money back together with a return.